The United States particularly hopes that these EU companies will invest in the United States, which is what Trump wants to do. So there is an outcome. The EU is likely to be charged 10% or even higher tariffs by Trump. Looking at the world, looking at China, Trump has really started a trade war and has actually charged 10% on Chinese goods. The original 25% tariffs that were blackmailed from Canada and Mexico were announced to be suspended for 1 month. The EU is very nervous. The EU has revealed a message from top to bottom that it will have a difficult negotiation with Trump. How will the trend of the global trade war develop next? If Trump really wants to charge Canada and Mexico a 25% tariff as threatened at the end of January, then the entire North American industrial chain may be in chaos, given the very close industrial chains between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. You can think about the automotive industry chain with the most frequent cross-border flows here. Every cross-border transaction is charged 25% because the United States collects tariffs on auto parts from Canada and Mexico. Then the other side will also retaliate, and after a few rounds, the cost of automobile production will go up. As a result, the most optimistic estimate is that the price of American cars will rise by 50% in a few months. Let's look at the crude oil exported by Canada to the United States. Even if a 10% tariff is imposed, it may have a huge impact on the US refined oil market. Because many US refineries have specific standards, they are specifically used to refine certain Canadian crude oil, so this 25% tariff is more like blackmail, because it will push up costs and inflation. Everyone will ask what will happen in 30 days. I think Canada and Mexico will definitely compromise, and the United States may also impose certain tariffs on certain goods, but it will basically be a peaceful ending. The most tense thing now is the European Union, because the European Union and the United States are separated by the Atlantic Ocean, and it has no choice. Because it does not have a very close cross-border industrial chain connection in North America, and it has 3 conditions that can be blackmailed by Trump. First, the European Union has a relatively large trade surplus with the United States. Second, the European Union itself and the United States do not pose a so-called national security threat to the United States. Third, the United States particularly hopes that these EU companies will invest in the United States, which is what Trump wants to do. So there is an outcome. The EU is likely to be subject to a 10% or even higher tariff by Trump. Let's wait and see. Back to the Sino-US relationship, since Trump's tariffs on China are true, China has also quietly countered, mainly in the following aspects. First, the focus of the counterattack is the import of oil and liquefied natural gas. It is said that during the Spring Festival, economic and trade officials from China and the United States have been negotiating. Trump is asking for a lot of money, hoping that China can promise to import $500 billion worth of goods from the United States every year. If you don't sell high-end chips, weapons, or software, how can you let China import so many goods? Trump is eyeing oil and gas, which will have a global impact in the future. He hopes that China can increase its imports of oil and liquefied natural gas from the United States. Now China's import share is more given to Russia and Saudi Arabia, so Trump especially wants to use this to leverage the global oil and gas situation. So this time, China's countermeasures are also very thorough. It has set an additional tariff of 10% on crude oil from the United States and an additional tariff of 15% on liquefied natural gas from the United States. Second, conduct an antitrust investigation on Google. Nvidia has already been investigated for antitrust, and there is also a saying that it plans to conduct an antitrust investigation on Intel's market business in China. These large companies can be said to be the new upstarts next to Trump, so China's antitrust investigation on them is also a way to deal with Trump's tariff war to some extent. Important measures. Because in the past few years, some American technology companies have spared no effort in suppressing China's technological progress. For example, Intel played an important role in the passage of the original chip bill. Now China has made breakthroughs in both software and hardware. Of course, Chinese have the confidence to include these companies in the overall economic and trade strategy with the United States. Third, China also carries out export controls and has included some relatively rare metals such as tungsten in the export control list. Some time ago, China included tungsten and later ladders in the control list. In fact, it has had a considerable impact on the West. In these areas, the United States has been pulling Western countries to decouple from China and break the supply chain, and get rid of their dependence on China's supply chain. After you complete your investment and make the product, China will lift the control and let Chinese product hit the global market to see how you respond. Of course, the United States will impose a 10% tariff on China this time. Not only includes mainland China, but also Hong Kong, China. In addition, the relevant departments of the United States have further instructed that the U.S. postal system will suspend receiving parcels from mainland China and Hong Kong, China. This involves the original U.S. postal system that can provide tax exemption for goods below $800 when they come in. Now it seems that he must plug this loophole. It should be said that this is also an important bargaining chip for future negotiations between the two sides. Since the trade war has started, let's go. Regarding the trade war between China and the United States in the past few days. Tariffs on the EU, Canada, and Mexico. Trump is pressuring EU companies to invest in the US and has threatened to impose 10% or higher tariffs on European imports. The 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico were temporarily suspended, but if reimposed, they could severely disrupt North American industrial supply chains, especially in the automotive and oil industries. U.S. cars may see a 50% price increase due to rising production costs if cross-border tariffs are fully implemented. U.S.-China trade war. Trump has already imposed 10% tariffs on Chinese goods, prompting countermeasures from China, which include 10% tariffs on U.S. crude oil and 15% on liquefied natural gas, LNG. Antitrust investigations into U.S. tech giants like Google, Nvidia, and potentially Intel. Export controls on rare metals like tungsten, affecting Western supply chains and technological industries. Global oil and gas strategy. Trump aims to leverage the global oil market by encouraging China to increase imports of U.S. oil and LNG. However, China's existing partnerships with Russia and Saudi Arabia have limited its dependency on U.S. energy exports. Postal and trade restrictions. The U.S. is closing loopholes that allowed duty-free imports of low-value goods from mainland China and Hong Kong, further tightening trade regulations. Strategic countermeasures and negotiations. Both sides appear to be using tariffs and regulatory measures as bargaining chips in ongoing negotiations. The European Union is in a vulnerable position due to its trade surplus with the US and lack of an interconnected industrial chain like North America's. The escalating trade war involves a complex web of tariffs, retaliatory measures, and negotiations across major global economies. While the US seeks to protect its industries and increase foreign investment, affected countries, particularly China, are countering with strategic policies to minimize their dependence on US goods and technology.